To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang. Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. I'm so sorry for the delay. For those of you that have been waiting patiently for the live stream to begin. Unfortunately, everything has gone bloody wrong. The pack, the power pack, if you like, the USB hub that all of my USB devices go into, I think has stopped working. So that means that I've got no wired connection to my computer here that I normally stream from. I've got no connection from my microphone into the computer that I normally stream from. I've got no connection to the camera that I usually use to stream. So unfortunately, I've just plugged in another laptop and we've just gone on the Wi-Fi with the microphone plugged directly in. But that is a big problem and something I'm going to need to get sorted. But I really do appreciate you all sticking with me because I know a lot of you were in the chat for the initial stream, which I went live on, and then it didn't bloody work. And then I had to start all over again from scratch. And it's been a bit of a disaster. And yeah, well, we're here in the end. So good to see so many of you. Let me say a few hellos before we get into today's podcast, on which we're going to be discussing who Arsenal should buy, who Arsenal should sell, and for how much. I'm going to try and nail down some valuations for not just players that we could be selling on this summer, but for some of the players that we're looking to sign as well. And I guess what we can do is towards the end of the summer, when we have a clearer idea of how this window is going to look, we can go back and we can see whether I was even close to being right, if I was way off the mark. And I've got a feeling a lot of you are going to tell me that I'm off the mark in the live chat. So we'll get into all of that. But yeah, it'll be a good exercise to do, and I'm really looking forward to it. Really interested to hear from you as well, who it is that you'd like to see Arsenal sign this summer and who it is that you think Arsenal should sell from the current group as well. So lots and lots to get into. Let's not waste any more time. I've wasted enough time trying to get to the bottom of what the bloody problem was. Let's talk Arsenal. That's much more fun, isn't it? Okay, so I want to start by talking about the players that Arsenal should sell. Now, if I just bring this up, hold on, if I can I zoom in a little bit more here? And then that way you guys can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. So there's a load of Arsenal players I think that should be on the list for sale this summer. A lot of players that are on the peripheries of our team, a lot of players that I just don't think really have a future here. There are some that I'm on the fence about selling. There are some that I'm not sure whether it's worth our while moving them on or whether we should be looking to keep them. It just totally depends on what we could potentially get in for these players. I think that's really, really important here. Let's start with Aaron Ramsdale, the goalkeeper, who, of course, has fallen out of favour. You know, there's no doubt about that. Mikel Arteta brought David Raya in. He thought that he would be an upgrade on Aaron Ramsdale. And I think although a lot of us were struggling with that decision when it was initially taken, I think you have to say that given the evidence, given the fact that David Raya has gone on to win the Golden Glove, that Arsenal have kept an insane amount of clean sheets this season and have been all round defensively very, very good, you have to say it was a decision that was justified. What I've tried to do here, and I'll just zoom out a little bit so you can see what I've done here. There we go. So what I've done is I have put an estimated fee that I think we could be looking to get for each of these players. And if I've marked them yellow, it means I would consider selling them if the money was right. If I've marked them green, it means that, in my opinion, we should categorically 100% be looking to move these players on. So let's start working our way through the list with Aaron Ramsdale, who I've just discussed. He's got a yellow for me in the sell/keep column. And the reason for that is because unless somebody's going to come and make a good offer for Aaron Ramsdale, and Aaron Ramsdale is desperate to go, wanting to go, knocking on the door, looking for that kind of first team number one starting opportunity again, then I think we should keep him. An offer of around about 20 million, if of course Aaron Ramsdale wants to go as well, would probably do it for me. And this is a big debate. I've heard a lot of people say, no way, 20 million, that's ridiculous. That's pocket change. Actually, what we should be looking for somebody like Aaron Ramsdale is 35 to 40 million pounds. To those people, I say, what planet are you living on? Because there is no way that anybody is going to come in and make an offer of 40 million pounds for Aaron Ramsdale. I think if you get 20, you'll be lucky. And the reason for that is simple. It's not because Aaron Ramsdale isn't a talent. It's not because him being out of the starting lineup has meant that as a goalkeeper overall, his level has dropped significantly and he's no longer a valuable asset. But when you don't play, your value tanks. That's what happens. And even more so, I think, than in any other position when you're a goalkeeper. I really, really do believe that. So when it comes to Aaron Ramsdale, I think if you could get 20 million solid, no loan fees, no options, none of this nonsense, basically, where they try and pay it all in installments and all the rest of it, and they try and pull your leg a little bit. Basically, if you can get 20 million pound in the door this summer for Aaron Ramsdale, I think you sell. But if you can't get that and you can convince Aaron Ramsdale to stay put and to give it a bit longer, then I would probably keep him. I then move on to Emile Smith-Rowe. And the estimated fee that I've put down for Emile Smith-Rowe is around about 25 million. And I've put a green marker next to him, which means good to go, sell, because I just don't see where Emile Smith-Rowe fits in. Arsenal need another goalkeeper outside of David Raya, and Aaron Ramsdale's as good a deputy as you can get. So for me, that sale or that decision to let him go would be totally dependent on A, what he wants, and B, what the fee looks like. With Emile Smith-Rowe, I think it's just time to move him on. And I think that that's because I don't see where he fits in this system. I feel like the team's evolved past him. I've said it before. And I don't really know how you work Emile Smith-Rowe back into the plans. He's shown very little. People will come back at me and say, well, that's because he hasn't played. He's played very little, etc., etc. And I totally accept that. I totally get that. And I totally understand where you're coming from. But what's the point in keeping a hold of him any longer? We've had lots of concerns over the years about his fitness problems. It feels like he might have come through that, but you can't be certain because he's not played with any real regularity. If he was to start playing week in, week out, would he be robust enough? Would his body hold up? And would he be able to contribute week in, week out? The answer to that question is we just don't know. But look, as I say, I don't see where he fits. So for me, sell. But again, people talking about 40 million pounds, ridiculous. You're just not going to get it. You're just simply not going to get it. This guy's hardly kicked the ball this season. If I have a look through his Premier League minutes this season, bear with me. I did have all of this up on the screen on my other computer before everything went to pot. Which is why this pod probably seems a lot less organized than it bloody should be. I'm annoyed at myself about it. I'm annoyed at the fact that I'm having to scroll through my phone to find these details that I had all in place earlier. But look, he only played 10% of our Premier League minutes last season. He was only in the starting 11 8% of the time. Okay, so to think that he's going to have retained all of the value that he might have had last summer is mad. 345 minutes of Premier League football, 13 appearances. That's all Emile Smith-Rowe made in the last season. Plus, add the questions about his fitness. Plus, add the questions, about sort of whether he's still as outstanding a player as he was 2-3 years ago, given that he's hardly played any football since. If we got 25 million for Emile Smith-Rowe this summer, and again, I know you're going to tell me that I'm quoting it at a really cheap price and all the rest of it. If we get 25 million, I'll be delighted. Thomas Partey is the next one on my list, and he falls into the same category as Aaron Ramsdale for me. If the right offer comes in, sell him. With Thomas Partey, he is someone on a massive wage as well, which obviously means that if you move him on, it does give you a little bit more wiggle room with regards to what you're doing around players coming in. And the other thing that people need to kind of take into consideration and take into account is that we know a lot of the Arsenal players who joined the club prior to our return to the Champions League had clauses in their contracts that said that should we qualify for the Champions League, they would get pay bumps and they'd move up a level in terms of the pay, the pay structure, which means that some of our outgoings on a lot of these players have probably increased from what they were 2 years ago because of those clauses that I understand to be in place, right? So someone like Thomas Partey is on a big wage. Again, the big question is around fitness. And so there is an openness and a willingness on my side, if I were Edu, if I were the sporting director, to let him go. The issue is that how much are you going to get for Thomas Partey at this stage in his career and with all the issues that we've discussed? And so I think if somebody came in and offered 15, 20 million for Thomas Partey, I'd take it in a heartbeat and I'd let him go. But if someone comes in with a measly offer, which is kind of what I expect to come in for Thomas Partey this summer, I expect perhaps an Italian club to come in with one of those, I'll tell you what, let us take him on loan and we'll pay for him later kind of things. I'm not entertaining those. And in which case, I'd rather keep him, take the risk, try and get him through pre-season, see how he looks fitness-wise, and maybe use him sparingly as a deputy, as someone who comes in and out of the side for next season. Because I think to get another Thomas Partey, it will cost a lot of money. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that I think we still need to go out and get a midfielder. So regardless of whether Partey goes or stays, that's on my agenda. That's on my list of things to do. If someone comes in and says, here's 15 million for Thomas Partey, I'd let him go. But if anyone comes in with an offer of up to 10 million, I probably take the risk on him and see if I can get him playing again and see if I can get him working his way back towards a better physical state than the one that he's currently in. So he gets an amber marker for me again, because I would sell if the price was right. But if it's not, I don't think he's someone I'm in a hurry to see the back of. I then move on to Eddie Nketiah, who I've put a green next to. Good to go, needs to go for his own good more than anything, Eddie Nketiah, because he's far too good a forward player to be sitting around on the bench and doing nothing. That's the truth of the matter. Is he good enough for Arsenal? Probably not. Is he good enough to lead the line for Mikel Arteta's side if they want to be challenging for Premier League titles? Probably not. So I'd let Eddie Nketiah go. And again, the estimated fee I've put down is around about 20 million, and he only gets a fee of around about 20 million attached to his name in my estimations, because he's a striker. Strikers score goals. They provide the most valuable commodity in football. Therefore, they are normally the most expensive players. But again, am I totally convinced that someone's going to come in and offer that? No, I'm not. And so I'd probably deal at anything between 15 and 18 million as well, if that was, again, a straight up, no strings attached deal. None of this nonsense of, we'll pay now, we'll pay later, and all of this rubbish, or, take him on loan with an option to buy and all the rest of it. No, not for me. These are players, the ones that I've marked green next to. So far, I've marked Emile Smith-Rowe in that category, Eddie Nketiah. I need to move them on now, and I need them to go for their own good as well, because really and truly, they are stuck. They are stuck at this moment in time, and they're not playing. And we keep talking about the fact that we can sell and raise money this summer. But I'll tell you what, going through this list, going through these names when I was putting this together earlier today, I don't think we're in to receive as much money this summer in for players as people think. Taking it on to Reece Nelson, I've put him down as a green as well, because he's another one for me that probably needs to go now. No doubt about that in my mind. I've put 10 million as the estimated fee. If we got that, we'd be lucky for, again, a player that's been a real bit part at Arsenal Football Club and clearly doesn't have a future in Mikel Arteta's setup and system. Moving on to Fabio Vieira, I've put him as an amber as well, because I'm really on the fence about this. There's a part of me that feels like he deserves one more season to prove himself. But then I know people will come back at me and say, well, why wouldn't you give Emile Smith-Rowe another season without any injury issues? The truth is, Emile Smith-Rowe ain't broken back into the team, and Fabio Vieira has been nowhere near it either. But because of what we invested in Fabio Vieira, because of, because it's so unlikely that we receive anywhere near what we paid for him, and because of the fact that any profit. We will, to be quite frank, we won't make any profit on Fabio Vieira. But obviously, with Emile Smith-Rowe being homegrown, that goes straight on the books for PSR. That really helps Arsenal. Does selling Fabio Vieira help? Probably not. But if an offer was to come in for £15 million, which is some £20 million shy of what we paid for him, I'd accept it, because I don't think there's a market out there for this player. I just don't think he's done enough yet. Two other players I've mentioned before we move on to the players I'd like to see us bring in. Sambi Lokonga, I've put him down as 10 million. That is the absolute ceiling, I think, in terms of what we would get for him. And for Nuno Tavares, I've put 3 million. But you know what? I'd give Nuno Tavares away at this stage, because I really am not convinced by him in the slightest. So that amount of money that I've kind of totaled up, and this is if we were to sell all of these players that I've mentioned. So Ramsdale for 20, Smith-Rowe for 25, Partey for 10, Nketiah for 20, Reece Nelson for 10, Fabio Vieira for 15, Lokonga for 10, and Nuno Tavares for 3, we'd bring in 113 million on player sales. So what do we need? Who do we need? Who should we be looking at as our primary targets? We'll get into that right after this very, very short pause. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Okay, so who would I like to see Arsenal bring in this summer? I want to start off by identifying the 3 positions that I think are really, really important to us in terms of continuing the evolution of this squad, taking it on to the next level. First and foremost, we got to look at the goalkeeping situation. If we're talking about Ramsdale going, we need to bring in another goalkeeper. I'm okay with us going out and bringing in someone, though, that maybe is at the other end of their career, that is in a place where they are trying to, I say trying to, look, if it's someone who is at the latter stages or is in the latter stages of his career, but has incredible experience and all the rest of it, then, you know, great. Let's do that, because I think we could really save some cost. And at the end of the day, when you think about how little Aaron Ramsdale played this season, he played 2 games after David Raya came in, and both of those games were games that David Raya was not eligible in. And I'm talking about Premier League games here, against, of course, his parent club, Brentford. So for that reason, I think we need to spend big on a deputy goalkeeper? No. And I think if we were to go and get someone who's 32, 33 plus, who's quite happy to come in and play that role and just wants to be in a winning environment at a big club, etc., I'm quite happy for us to go that way. And we know that Bailo, the Feyenoord goalkeeper, has been spoken about a lot. We know that he is someone who Arsenal are looking at, who Arsenal quite like, and who has a lot of similar characteristics to David Raya as a goalkeeper. So maybe he'd be a good fit. I've sort of allocated on my kind of like mini Arsenal budget 20 million towards bringing in another goalkeeper, but I'd hope that we could do that at less if we were bringing in someone like I've described, perhaps in the twilight of his career. As he says in the chat, that Raya is 29, he ain't a spring chicken. Yeah, but as a goalkeeper, I don't think that's an issue. I don't think you're anywhere near the end of your peak years as a goalkeeper at 29. Different if you're talking about a midfielder who's expected to get up and down the pitch constantly. For a goalkeeper, I think it's very, very different. Also, a couple of people have mentioned other players in the chat that I should have included in the sales. Mika Biereth is one of them. What do you people think we're going to get for him? If we got £3 million, I'd be over the moon. I don't think we're even going to get that. Sturm Graz are not in a position to pay big money for him. And the other one that someone mentioned is Kieran Tierney. I suspect that we're probably going to end up terminating Kieran Tierney's contract. I'm not saying that I deliberately left those guys off. I'll be honest with you, I forgot to include them. But thinking about it now that you've raised it, I don't think that's going to make a massive difference to these calculations that I've made here. Okay, so I've established we need a goalkeeper in the event that Aaron Ramsdale goes. I think we desperately need another centre midfielder. It needs to be a top-level centre midfielder, in my opinion. And I think we could do with another forward as well, whether it be a wide forward or whether it be someone that plays through the middle. gives you a hint as to who I've selected, because this person could technically do both of those roles, and his arrival would give a bit more license to the likes of Jesus to go out wide. And yeah, so that could be a solution there as well. But in terms of goalkeeper, I haven't come up with a name because I don't know who I'm really looking at there. But it's two Premier League based players. In fact, they're both based at the same club, that are really kind of attracting my interest for further up the pitch. Now, they're going to be costly. They're going to cost a few quid. Bruno Guimaraes of Newcastle United, we know he's got that £100 million release clause if you do the deal by the end of June. Do you know what, guys? I would go out there and I would do it. I would trigger it. And I'll tell you why. We know from some of the things that Edu's been saying recently that Premier League experience is a big factor. Premier League experience is something that he and his recruitment team do look at and do take into consideration when going out to sign players. I think I look at him and I think he's ready now. I don't think I'd have any concerns about him settling down in the Premier League. He wouldn't be one of those players where you're kind of waiting for him to acclimatize to life in this league. And I think if you want to go on and win the Premier League title next season, and we know that you pretty much have to be perfect to achieve that against this Manchester City side, then you're going to need players that can come in and can make the difference instantly, just like Declan Rice did. Bruno Guimaraes is 26 years old, which to me means he's kind of just above the bracket in which Arsenal ideally like to sign players. I'm talking age-wise. I think normally in an ideal world, Arsenal like to look at players that are around about 23, 24 years old, players that will have bags and bags of experience, given their age, but also still have plenty of room to grow. And there's plenty of longevity, with regards to that deal in terms of keeping that player during their peak. And then maybe you can even look to sell him a little bit later on or whatever. But Bruno Guimaraes feels like a really, really good option to me. The fact that he can play 6, the fact that he can play 8, the fact that that gives us flexibility, I think is a good thing. So he is someone I'd be looking at. And I've put down here £100 million because that's what we know his release clause is, at least until the end of June. Try your luck, Arsenal. See what happens. The other player I've put down is the forward of my dreams right now, and that is Alexander Isak of Newcastle United. Alexander Isak, I've put him down as 120 million. Now, I think that's too much. I think that that's probably beyond what Arsenal would be willing to pay. And I think when you've done all the heavy lifting of building a squad, and we've done most of the heavy lifting already, when you get to this phase that we're in today and the point that we're at today, you then earn yourself the luxury of not needing to go out and sign 5 or 6 players every summer. And if your revenue is constantly increasing, like ours has increased this year, we have, of course, gone to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. We finished second again in the Premier League, which brought in a good amount of revenue. We're talking about potentially raising around about £100 million in sales as well. Then you find yourself in a position where you can spend £200 million in the summer, but now you don't need to spend it on 4, 5, 6 players. Actually, you can spend it on 1 or 2 really elite level players that continue your team's development. I've put Alexander Isak down as £120 million on this. I think Newcastle at £120 million would be tempted. Would we probably have to push a bit more? Possibly. I don't think that we should go beyond that kind of area, that kind of vicinity, because in terms of money I'm talking about, because I've got a few concerns about his fitness, but B, because I just think the market is different now. I feel like there has been a little bit of a crash. We saw it in January with regards to all the PSR stuff coming in, and that's played a massive part, right? So, yeah, I'm looking at him. He's the one that I want. I've put down 120 million for the purpose of this calculation, which would mean that our total spend on transfers, if we spent 20 million on a goalkeeper, 100 million on Bruno Guimaraes, which is the absolute top end, and 120 on Alexander Isak, which I believe, again, is the top end. Our net spend over the summer, if we were to sell the players we've mentioned, would only be 127 million, which isn't outrageous. In terms of alternatives to Isak, because I feel like that's the one that Arsenal wouldn't want to do in terms of finances, in terms of what it takes, in terms of the risks that he comes with. Then I've put down Joshua Zirkzee, and I really do believe that for £60 million, Joshua Zirkzee is someone that we could go out there and we could potentially get. And listen, if you got Joshua Zirkzee, all of a sudden you're talking about £47 million net spend up against those sales. And look, we might not get all of those players out of the door this summer, and we might not get the fees that I've put down for them. But if we did, and we're still very much in the green with regards to buying versus selling, which is not something that we've seen really from Arsenal over the last few years. And I do feel that at some point this is going to change. Then we could be in a really great position going forward. We've got Timber back. We've got Havertz now, a much better version of Kai Havertz, having sort of found his way at Arsenal, having developed and sort of built up his confidence again. We've got Declan Rice in the midfield. We've got a defensive pairing at the back that I just think are fantastic. So yeah, like we've got the basis of a really, really strong team. So that's the point I'm making. We don't need to go out every summer now and bring in 5-6 players. We can go in and add 2 and sometimes 3 and 2 again and sometimes 3, just to keep it fresh and to keep making sure that we're adding different weapons to our armory and that we're finding different solutions and keeping people guessing year after year after year. So in a nutshell, just to round up, just to wrap up before I go, because I know this has not been the greatest quality of live stream due to all the issues that I've had, the fact that we were half an hour late as a result of those issues. And I know Graham Sutherland, our good long-term listener, good friend, will say Harry was late. I was actually going to be on time until all of that went wrong. And those of you that got the notification would have known that. Okay, so look, Ramsdale, Partey, and Vieira, I'd consider selling if the money was right. Smith Rowe, Nketiah, Nelson, Lokonga, Tavares, and then, of course, Tierney, who was mentioned as well. I'd definitely get rid of those guys. I'd definitely move them on this summer if possible. And in terms of players coming in, I'd bring in a goalkeeper, I'd bring in Bruno Guimaraes, and I'd bring in Alexander Isak. Carl Regal has just said in the chat, do you not read super chats? I do, mate. I must have missed it. Bear with me a second. Let me scroll back. I always do want to read out super chats. I must have missed it. I don't have my PC working right now. So normally I have 2 screens. I have one where your comments are coming through and one where I can see what the output is. And unfortunately, that's not working for me. I'm like squinting on a little laptop here tonight. But you did send in a super chat. Thank you very much for that. And you say, what if someone offered 70 million for Martinelli? I'd consider that. I would, because look, I love Gabriel Martinelli, and I thought last season he was outstanding. I think he's been poor this season by comparison. But I've always had this question in the back of my mind about Martinelli as to how much better can he be than what we saw last season. And the truth is, I don't think he can be much better than what we saw last season. That felt like prime Gabriel Martinelli. And so if I don't think he can go any further, still a very good player in his own right, of course. But if I don't think he can go any further, then of course I would consider £70 million for a player that we paid, £6 million for. So yeah, I would probably take it. But it's a really, really good question, guys. Thank you all so much for your patience, for bearing with me. If I could just ask you, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. Look at me, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. It's all gone horribly wrong. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new. It really, really does help. And we'll be back tomorrow with another episode, hopefully without the technical glitches, hopefully without any problems. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all then. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great evening. Have a great Thursday. And of course, as always, up the Gunners.